I got my first bicycle, a second-hand Schwinn, with a Sturmey-Archer shifter, when I was about 10 years old. There were 5 boys on our block, and I was certainly the last one to learn how to ride. I didn't trust the thing. I could not understand how it could stand up on only 2 wheels, and I was not willing to trust the evidence of my eyes. It wasn't until my little sister Stephanie, totally unconcerned about the physics of the matter, effortlessly got going on her first attempt, that I was chagrined enough to try it myself. The Schwinn followed on my next birthday. Our bicycles gave us boys great freedom. Most of the others got paper routes. I simply used it to ride around the neighborhood, go to school, and the like. The dangers we encountered would certainly frighten modern parents. Helmets had yet to be invented, as far as we knew, and nobody had one. The bikes had hand brakes or coaster brakes, and the brake shoes gripped the rims of the wheels, which rather marginally when dry and hardly at all in wet weather. We lived at the end of Gladys Avenue, which runs straight up a hill, 18 degrees, far too steep to ride in low gear. We had to zigzag back and forth. It almost cost us our manhood a few times when those Sturmey-Archer shifters popped out of gear and banged our crotches down hard against the seat. Now, going downhill was another proposition. Our brakes simply couldn't hold on the hill, and we inevitably rolled through the stop sign at the bottom and across Navalier Avenue. Fortunately, there weren't too many cars and nobody ever ran into one. I rode that bicycle until I went away to Reed College in Portland. There I found an abandoned bicycle, a one-speed affair with 3/4 of a handlebar, the rest rusted off, which I rode for the 2 years it was there. I never locked it up. Nobody ever bothered to steal it. I don't remember ever even inflating the tires, although I must have taken it to a gas station periodically. I rode that bicycle all over the city. I can remember clearly having an Army surplus field jacket that would hold 6 quarts of beer, 2 in the breast pockets and 4 in the 2 side pockets. I then had a 5-year break as a college dropout in which I used a motorcycle instead of a bicycle. I bought a 1951 BMW R67 to commute, and soon afterwards I bought up a 12 starting over. Then I had a 5-year break from bicycling, in which I used a motorcycle instead. As a 20-year-old college dropout, with my first serious job, I bought a beat-up 1951 BMW R67 motorcycle for commuting. Soon afterwards, I bought a car. I drove them both through my graduation from Cal Berkeley and my subsequent employment at IBM in the Bay Area. I sold everything when I went to Vietnam. After Vietnam, my first post was in Germany, in Zweibrücken, right on the French border. Both the French and Americans had set up bases there during the occupation. I bought a Peugeot bike and the French PX shortly after arriving. I took extensive day trips, 40 and 50 miles, over the border into France and up to Saarbrücken. The bicycle followed me to Frankfurt, where I spent another 2 years. While I was there, I bought a tandem bicycle to ride around with my girlfriend Livia. Those 2 bicycles came back with me to America when I relocated. The house I bought on Heide Cooper Place in northwest Washington, D.C. was on a steep hill. Not too many people bicycled, but I relished the exercise. I kept that old Peugeot chained to the 6x6 upright supporting our redwood deck in back of the house. Now, for all its liberal pretensions, Washington, D.C. remains a highly segregated city. We almost never saw non-whites. On one occasion, however, a few did seem to appear in the neighborhood, and my bicycle went missing. The culprits aroused the suspicions of the D.C. police, who nabbed them 2 miles away in Georgetown before they got back to their side of town. However, the police department being what it was, I didn't get my bicycle back. The cops kept it as material evidence for a court case against these juveniles. I called a few times trying to locate it, and it never came back. At that time I was working for IBM in Bethesda, 5 miles from where I lived. I bought a new bike to commute with and mapped out a reasonable route. It was generally north-south, following Wisconsin Avenue. I was on Wisconsin itself for only a few blocks where there were no side streets, going through the Chevy Chase Golf Club. Otherwise, it was neighborhood streets without too much danger. I learned how to pack my suit and tie into a Samsonite briefcase that I strapped to the back of the bike, and I learned how to change in the men's room using paper towels. I had some concern that my fellow employees would find me a bit weird. However, since it was clear even at that point in the late 1970s that promotions were not going to white men, and if they were satisfied with my work, I really didn't have anything to lose. It turned out that nobody cared whatsoever anyhow. In 1980, I completed the best piece of work I had ever done for IBM, receiving, with yawns all around, and a munificent $500 award. That steeled my resolve to find someplace else to work. I went next door to Booz Allen Hamilton and jumped at the opportunity for a 10% raise. In my first few weeks, I drove my not-so-shabby Mercedes 450 SL to work. But once I'd established myself, I determined that all the company really cared about was your performance. I went back to riding the bike, and again, nobody cared. Oh, and by the way, about this time, the DC police finally called to ask me to pick up my Peugeot bicycle from their warehouse in the nether reaches of southeast DC. When I got there, the bike had deteriorated to the point that I had to scrap it. I improved my commuting kit gradually. Over the course of the 15 years until I retired, I had 3 commute bikes and about 3 different setups for carrying my clothes. The best of them was something called a bushwhacker, which carried everything I needed quite neatly, kept it dry, and folded conveniently over the luggage rack. I split my time between Booz Allen's office in Bethesda and our U.S. Navy client in Crystal City, usually commuting by bicycle both ways. The total of 25 to 30 miles a day put me in fantastic shape. Washington, D.C. does have good provisions for bicycle commuters. The route to Crystal City went through Rock Creek Park, across the bridge, and followed the Mount Vernon bike trail. It was fast as well as safe, not too many obstacles to slow you down. I worked for Booz for only a year. The company would do anything for money. I wouldn't. My excess of candor with our clients did not put me in good stead. They were charging a pretty penny for my time, $100 an hour. I reckoned that if I was worth $100 an hour with their management, I must be worth $200 without it. I became an independent consultant. It took a couple of years to get established. My most significant early client was Computer Sciences Corporation. I was introduced to them to satisfy a very small requirement, to describe the IBM 3741 programmable workstation, a key punch replacement, for a proposal they were doing. Computer Sciences has not historically worked much with IBM equipment. The proposal they were working on was to the Saudi Ministry of Petroleum and Minerals. And it was actually a string of 6 proposals for related pieces of work, a huge business volume. The lead writer on the proposal I had been brought in to support suffered a nervous breakdown. Since nobody there knew the IBM product line, I led the proposal writing effort. They liked my work, and I wound up being a lead writer on some of the other 6 proposals. CSC eventually won 3 of those, and the upshot was that I worked at their offices out in Reston for a couple of years. The bicycle route from where I lived in the Mohican Hills section of Bethesda to Reston was once again pretty convenient. I rode on city streets for a mile to the Capitol Crescent Trail, rode that down to Chain Bridge, rode neighborhood roads for a couple of miles to the Old Dominion Bike Trail, and followed that out to Reston. It was a pretty substantial ride, about 15 miles, and I always arrived feeling invigorated. I was pretty lucky with my other gigs as an independent consultant. A stint with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce had me working out in Vienna, Virginia. A long engagement with Honeywell had me riding out to Tyson's Corner. And then in the short period of actual W-2 employment, which I undertook in order to learn the Oracle Financial Software Suite, I was working again in Tyson's Corner at the MITRE Corporation. Leaving regular employment, I formed a partnership with Joe Costantino, the Oracle Financials expert at MITRE, and we found business at Black & Decker in Baltimore, then a long engagement at Watkins Johnson in Gaithersburg, and finally with Microsystems in Lanham, Maryland. Gaithersburg was the longest of these engagements. It was a wonderful 17-mile ride. I rode only once to Baltimore, and likewise only once to Lanham. The distances were okay, but the neighborhoods were dicey, and the traffic was something I didn't want to risk. There were no safe roads. I retired shortly after the Lanham gig with Micros in 1996. All the while I was commuting by bicycle, I was making increasingly long excursions on the weekends. A typical outing would start about 5 o'clock on a summer morning and take me along the Potomac River up to Seneca and Poolesville and Dickerson, and then back and forth across the Potomac upstream to Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. An alternative route would take me on the same Washington and Old Dominion route that I'd used to get to Computer Sciences in Reston and continue riding up to the Blue Ridge Mountain. Either way, I could do about 100 miles in a day. My longest trip combined the two. I rode up to Harpers Ferry and then to Charlestown, West Virginia, and back down the Old Dominion Trail. Total about 125 miles. It absolutely defined the physical limits of a 55-year-old man. In the year after I moved to Rockville following my divorce, most of my rides went north through Montgomery County. There was a pleasant 10-mile ride through Rock Creek Park that ended at Lake Needwood. And I used a bicycle to get to know the city of Kiev after I moved here in 2007. But Kiev simply doesn't offer the range of alternatives that Washington, D.C. does. After the bike was stolen out of the stairwell of my apartment, Oksana and I bought new ones with the best of intent, but since our son Eddie's birth in 2011, our focus has been on kids more than recreation. We use the bike in summer to go to the beach and occasionally to go the 2 or 3 miles to the local shopping center to buy groceries. The next chapter of my bicycle story will involve Eddie. Last summer, when he was 5, we made a couple of 7-mile outings, despite the fact that he has a 12-inch bicycle with training wheels. This is the summer those training wheels come off. Although Kiev may be somewhat limiting for a serious road biker, it's pretty easy to plot out a 20-mile route from our house. That'll be challenging enough for Eddie for the next few years. So that's a chronology of my life with bicycles. There's a lot of philosophy involved in riding a bike, which I cover in my discussion of bicycling with Eddie. I hope he comes to look at the world the same way I do. As always, the text of this YouTube presentation is on my LiveJournal site. This is Graham, signing off again from Kiev.